Prologue. The Balance of Italy. On April 9, 1454, the Treaty of Lodi was signed. This treaty ended 3 decades of war in northern Italy. Italy at the time was a fractured land full of cities, republics, and principalities, chief among them being the Duchy of Milan, the Republic of Venice, the Republic of Florence, the Papal States, and the Kingdom of Naples. After the treaty, these states formed the Italic League, an alliance that kept the peace in the peninsula. Milan was a strong duchy. The Visconti family ruled it with an organized central government. When the last Visconti died in 1447, Milan briefly became a republic. Then a mercenary, or condottiero, named Francesco Sforza took power and became duke. Under him, Milan grew wealthier, and the Sforza family worked hard to keep the people's support. Even in peace, Sforza kept a strong army to counter Venice. Venice was a powerful merchant republic that often tried to expand. It traded goods like silk, spices, and jewelry from the Middle East and Asia across Europe, making Venice very rich. Florence, in the region of Tuscany, was also rich, but it focused on banking. The Medici family controlled its wealth. Cosimo and Lorenzo de' Medici used money to support art and building projects, starting the Renaissance. Lorenzo helped keep the peace in Italy by using skillful diplomacy. The Pope, meanwhile, ruled central Italy, but faced resistance from local nobles and cities. Still, his spiritual authority as the head of the Catholic Church gave him strong influence. South of Rome, King Ferdinand I ruled Naples. Ferdinand I was a member of the House of Trastamara, who also ruled over Castile and Aragon in Iberia. Naples was a troublemaker in Italy, and in 1480 they were even invaded by the Ottomans, showing just how vulnerable Italy could be. In 1453, the Kingdom of France won the 100-Year War against England. Professional standing armies and new gunpowder artillery helped them win. Before this, French kings did not fully control all of France. They gave land to vassals and family members to rule on their behalf. After the war, the crown started to take back this power, starting with the strong Duchy of Burgundy. Burgundy had grown rich and powerful, independent in all but name. In 1477, Duke Charles died at the Battle of Nancy. His only child Mary took over. Mary was young and inexperienced, so King Louis XI of France tried to seize her lands. To stay safe, Mary married Maximilian I, the son of the Holy Roman Emperor and Archduke of Austria, Frederic III. Burgundy became part of the House of Habsburg when Mary died in 1482. Louis XI tried to reduce this new threat on his border. In 1482, between his son Charles VIII and Mary's daughter Margaret, with Margaret's dowry being the regions of Burgundy and Picardy. Around the same time, France gained more land when the Royal Angevin line ended. Regions like Provence and Anjou passed directly to the crown, giving France better access to the Mediterranean and to Italy. Charles VIII became king in 1483 at age 13. Early in Charles VIII's reign, war broke out with Duke Francis II of Brittany, which was legally part of France, but, like Burgundy, had long acted almost like an independent state. Francis II was defeated in July 1488 and later died in September. Maximilian I planned to marry his daughter and successor, Anne of Brittany, but Charles forced her to cancel it and accept him instead. The takeover of Brittany made other European powers distrust France. Maximilian I felt insulted because Charles broke their promise to marry his daughter, Margaret. Regardless, France now also had a claim to the Kingdom of Naples. The Pope had given Naples to the Angevins in 1265, and still claimed the right to approve its ruler. Charles became interested in this claim in 1484. Neapolitan exiles and a monk, Francis of Paola, urged him to act, saying he should free Naples and defend Christianity from the Muslim Turks. Italy's balance of power changed in 1492 when Lorenzo de' Medici died. Soon after, Pope Innocent VIII died, and the Aragonese Alexander VI became Pope through bribery. He was clever but very corrupt, and was focused on helping his family, the Borgias, gain power. Lorenzo's son, Piero de' Medici, took power in Florence but lacked the skill of his father. Piero secretly allied with Ferdinand I of Naples and his son Alfonso. Alfonso complained about his son-in-law, Gian Galeazzo Sforza, the Duke of Milan, who held the title but no real power. Instead, the Duke's uncle, Ludovico Sforza, had taken control of the duchy, acting as a ruler while keeping his nephew as a figurehead. Ludovico Sforza feared losing his power, as Alfonso had his own designs for Milan. Ludovico sent emissaries to Charles, asking for help. Many French nobles warred against war, citing strong enemies, high costs, and long travel. Charles, now 22, seeking glory instead. He made a secret deal with Ludovico. France would invade Naples, and Ludovico would provide troops, money, and support. By the end of 1493, France was ready for war. Part 1. There and Back Again. King Ferdinand I died on January 25, 1494. His son, Alfonso II, took the throne. At the same time, people across Italy felt afraid. In Puglia, people said they saw 3 suns with thunder and lightning. Near Arezzo, others claimed they saw ghostly armies in the sky with drums and trumpets. Across many towns, statues seemed to sweat. Ludovico Sforza wanted full control of Milan. He married his niece, Bianca Maria, to Emperor Maximilian, promising a large dowry to secure his claim to Milan. At first, Ludovico invited France to help weaken Alfonso II, only expecting a small French expedition. Instead, Charles planned to lead a large invasion force himself. Ludovico feared this powerful army might remove Alfonso II outright, not just weaken him. Many Italian states also felt uneasy. In Florence, people wanted peace with France because of trade. But Piero de' Medici supported Naples and refused French requests for help or safe passage. In response, Charles expelled Medici bankers from France. Venice, meanwhile, stayed neutral. Pope Alexander VI supported Alfonso and promised to crown him. Charles needed Genoa to move his army by sea. He hired Swiss pikemen to defend it, and they defeated a Neapolitan force at Raffaello in September. Soon after, Charles crossed the Alps with a large army of tens of thousands from France, Switzerland, and Italy. He met Ludovico at Asti, but fell ill with smallpox. Some urged him to turn back, but Charles was committed. While in Piacenza, Charles learned that Duke Gian Galeazzo Sforza had died, and Ludovico had since taken power. He also met Piero's brother, Giovanni de' Medici, who urged him to go to Florence and deal with him. As French troops moved south, they attacked towns with great violence. At Martano and later at Trevizzano, they killed many soldiers and civilians. These attacks scared other Italian towns into giving up. Florence was also frightened, so Piero decided to make peace. Outside the city walls, he met Charles and quickly agreed to his demands in November. He gave up key cities like Pisa and Livorno, and promised money in support. Even the French felt surprised. When Florence heard this, the city became furious. The Medici family lost control, and cities like Pisa declared independence. Charles then entered Florence. Talks grew tense, and he made strong demands. During one meeting, Piero Capponi tore up the terms, declaring that, "You sound your trumpets, and we will sound our bells." This shocked the French, who softened their demands so that Florence paid money, but stayed sovereign. After 10 days, Charles left the city and continued marching south. Good weather helped the French army move fast as they neared Rome. Venice and Ludovico grew worried. They feared Charles wanted something more than Naples, as he kept strongholds near Florence and Siena. So, they started planning an alliance against him. The French entered Rome in December 1494. Pope Alexander VI sided with Alfonso's son, Ferdinand, the Duke of Calabria. In the end, Alexander promised friendship, and Charles gained fortresses and support for Naples. Charles proceeded to stay in Rome for a month and sent a vanguard to Naples. Trouble was already spreading in Naples, as Alfonso was detested for his cruelty. When Alfonso heard that his heir had left Rome, panic took hold of him. He gave up the throne to him and fled Naples to friendly Sicily. The new King Ferdinand II tried to fight, but when that failed, he also fled to the island of Ischia. On February 21st, 1495, Charles entered a happy Naples. Even though the French had captured Naples with little resistance, it did not mean that it was not growing. In late 1494, Ferdinand II spoke with Venice and worked with Maximilian, who envied French success. Maximilian agreed to join forces, even with his old rival Venice. Venice also pushed Ludovico to leave the French, as he feared the presence of a nearby French army led by Charles' relative, Louis, the Duke of Orleans. In March 1495, leaders from Milan, Spain, and the Empire met in Venice. On March 31st, they formed the League of Venice, also called the Holy League. They claimed it was defensive, but they clearly aimed to stop Charles. The League planned to attack French forces and restore Naples to its old rulers, and asked Florence to join. Even though Florence did not trust Charles, it did not join because they feared the might of the French army, and hoped to get Pisa back peacefully. Florence also faced internal change. Since the Medici family had lost power, new leadership rose to take their place. The fiery Dominican friar Girolamo Savonarola stepped in. He lived a strict life and believed God spoke to him through visions. Savonarola preached as a prophet, attacking wealth, luxury, and Renaissance culture, saying it pulled people away from Christ. Savonarola supported France and called for church reform, even against the Pope. In 1495, Alexander ordered him to come to Rome. Savonarola feared arrest and claimed illness to avoid going. The Pope then told him to stop preaching, and Savonarola obeyed, for a time. Charles was in Naples when he heard that his enemies had formed the Holy League. His court in France urged him to come home. The longer he stayed, the more time his enemies had to prepare. So, in May, the king began his return march north. Meanwhile, a large Italian army of 20,000 gathered to stop him, commanded by the Marquis of Mantua, Francesco II Gonzaga. The French had about 10,000 men, but strong cavalry, artillery, and Swiss infantry. Both sides met near the Tower River in July 1495, nestled in the foothills of the Apennine Mountains. On July 6th, near Fornovo, the battle began. The French crossed the river as cannons fired. Hired walking cavalry called Stratioti attacked the French baggage train, containing the many treasures the French had looted from the peninsula. Trying to save it, Charles became separated from his guard and nearly faced capture. After 2 hours, the battle ended with no clear winner. 4,000 Italians died, while the French lost fewer men, but most of their bounty. Still, the French safely returned home, so many saw them as the real victors. Around this time, a new disease spread in Europe, originating from Naples. The illness caused painful sores, ulcers, and severe body pain. Many linked this so-called French disease to voyages made during this time by Christopher Columbus. Later called syphilis, the terrible sickness now spread as armies marched and pillaged across Europe. While Charles returned to France, his relative, Duke Louis of Orleans, led a small attack in northern Italy. Milan now opposed France, so Louis took their city of Novara. Ludovico, however, managed to trap the French inside with help from the Venetians. With no help coming, Louis signed the Treaty of Vercelli with Ludovico on October 10, 1495. France could now use Genoa to supply Naples, and Louis could return to France. In southern Italy, events shifted fast. After Charles left, Alfonso and his son Ferdinand II chose to fight the remaining French armies in Naples. Ferdinand returned from Ischia and joined the Spanish commander Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, who had landed in Calabria. He took Reggio and moved north to Seminara. On June 28th, French cavalry quickly overran Spanish horsemen after crossing a river. When the Spanish fled, they exposed Ferdinand's infantry, who were promptly trampled. After the defeat, Ferdinand acquired Venetian support and entered Naples in July 1496. In August, the surviving pockets of resistance sailed back to France. Ferdinand's reign did not last long, unfortunately, as he died on October 7th, likely from malaria. Ferdinand's uncle, Frederic IV, took the throne. Part 2. A title gained, a crown lost. Many Italians thought life might return to normal after the French left. They were sorely mistaken. Despite failure, Charles saw his conquest of Naples as his greatest success. Preparations were made at once for a second invasion. Condottiero General Gian Trivulzio would lead 5,000 troops, and Duke Louis would follow with more. Afraid, Ludovico in Venice gave money to Maximilian, who sent a small army. On April 7th, 1498, Charles died suddenly. Earlier in the day, he had bumped his head on a door lintel, and a few hours later, while watching a tennis match, he suffered a stroke and died, age 27. He had no children, so his closest relative, Louis, became King Louis XII. The day after Charles lost his life, Girolamo Savonarola lost power in Florence. He had enforced strict religious rules and led people to burn books and luxury goods in the bonfire of the vanities. Alexander at one point excommunicated Savonarola and removed him from the church, but that did not stop the preacher. Savonarola had once claimed God would protect him from fire if needed. A Franciscan friar questioned this, and a Dominican supporter of Savonarola challenged the Franciscan to a trial by fire. On April 7th, a huge crowd gathered in Florence to watch the spectacle, but arguments and delays meant that the trial did not go through. The day after, a furious mob broke into Savonarola's monastery and arrested him. Officials tortured him until he confessed to inventing his prophecies. The same crowds that came to see the trial by fire also saw Savonarola burned to death on May 23, 1498. When Charles died, people felt safer because they thought Louis XII would not attack Italy. But Louis XII proved more skilled and confident than Charles. Like Charles, Louis claimed Naples, but he also claimed Milan through his grandmother, whose marriage agreement said her family could inherit Milan if the male Visconti line ended. The sigh of relief that Italy breathed when Charles died was quickly taken back when Louis declared himself to be the true Duke of Milan. Different Italian states reacted in different ways. Venice supported Louis and signed a treaty of law to gain some land. Florence began to question its old alliance with France. Their agreements, after all, had been with Charles, not Louis. Alexander also made a deal. He allowed Louis to divorce his wife and marry Anne of Brittany. In return, Louis would help Alexander's son, Cesare Borgia, gain land in Romagna. In July 1499, the French under Gian Trivulzio entered Italy with 30,000 soldiers. Venice sent 12,000 from the east. They captured Milanese towns quickly, often by force, and Ludovico fled to Tyrol as the French entered Milan itself on September 2nd. The Milanese people, however, grew angry at the new high taxes and the presence of foreign troops. Ludovico returned with Swiss mercenaries and briefly took Milan back in January 1500. But his army suffered from desertions, low supplies, lack of pay, and poor morale. On April 8th, French forces defeated Ludovico at Novara, thanks to Swiss soldiers refusing to fight their fellow countrymen on the opposite side. Ludovico was captured and sent back to France to live out the rest of his days a prisoner. Louis felt angry at Alexander because he did not help him win back Milan. Alexander then promised support if Louis attacked Naples. With 2,000 new French troops, Cesare Borgia marched into Romagna with about 7,000 of his own. His enemies fled before him, so he quickly took Pesaro and Rimini before moving on to Faenza. At the same time, Alexander raised money and power. He created 12 new cardinals, choosing men who paid large sums rather than the most qualified. He also announced a Jubilee year in Rome. Many pilgrims came, and even if they did not, they could still receive church forgiveness if they paid for indulgences. The Pope sent much of this money to his son for his campaigns. After Imola fell in 1500, Caesar attacked Forli. Caterina Sforza, a niece of the imprisoned Ludovico, surrendered after a 10-day bombardment. Caesar then improved his fiefdom by appointing fair officials and fixing justice. He even had Leonardo da Vinci inspect and improve defenses. Used to disorder, people in the region welcomed this change. By 1502, some Italian nobles were plotting against Caesar, who acted carefully in response. In December, he invited the conspirators to meet him and gain their trust. But when they reached the palace in Senigallia, guards suddenly arrested them, and they were soon executed. A Florentine diplomat who was with Caesar at the time, Niccolo Machiavelli, praised the move and was inspired to later write The Prince. After taking control of Milan, Louis looked south to Naples. In 1500, he signed the secret Treaty of Granada with King Ferdinand II of Aragon. The Treaty of Granada gave the north to Louis and the south to Ferdinand II. Both kings said they wanted to unite against the Turks and avoid fighting each other, but neither trusted the deal to last. In June 1501, a French army of 8,000 men marched from Milan to Naples. By the end of the month, the French, with help from Cesare Borgia, reached Capua, north of Naples. They attacked hard, broke into the city, and caused great destruction. Reports that Caesar later chose 40 of the most beautiful women in Capua for himself. King Frederic IV of Naples knew he could not defend his kingdom, and the French entered Naples on July 25th. Frederic fled to France and gave up his crown for land in Anjou. Louis d'Armagnac, the Duke of Nemours, became governor. Spain fought in the south, but faced tougher resistance. Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba held Barletta and waited for more troops. Small skirmishes and duels took place, such as the Challenge of Barletta, where Spanish-backed Italian knights beat French knights in a gentlemanly duel. In the bigger picture, however, both France and Spain claimed the rich provinces of Capitanata, Basilicata, which weren't outlined in the Treaty of Granada, and therefore caused tension. By early 1503, Spanish reinforcements had arrived and began to turn the tide. The French under Bernard Stewart, the Lord of Albany, won early victories at Seminara. On April 21st, 1503, Swiss infantry, Gascon archers, and French cavalry broke the Spanish line. 6 days later, Gonzalo de Cordoba marched out of Barletta and met the French at Cerignola. Gonzalo had his men dig ditches and parapets for his arquebusiers to hide behind. When the battle began, the French cavalry were deterred by the trenches, exposing the infantry. Spanish musket fire cut them down. In less than an hour, Namur was shot dead, as was 2,000 of his men. After his victory, Gonzalo entered Naples on May 16th Louis sent a new army, but it moved slowly, and many were demoralized as they thought Naples was already lost. On December 29th, Gonzalo crossed the Gargliano River and surprised the French, who fled back to France after the defeat. Gonzalo's patience and smart use of infantry and firearms helped defeat a numerically superior enemy, earning him the nickname the Great Captain. That August, Alexander and Cesare Borgia fell sick after a meal. Caesar was quick to take some strong medicine. His father was not as fortunate. Many believe Caesar tried to poison a cardinal, but a servant unknowingly mixed up the wines. French and Spanish cardinals met to elect a new pope, but could not agree. They eventually chose Pope Pius III, an old and sick man, who promptly died 26 days later. The result of the next election had already been decided before the conclave even began, however. Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere had gathered strong support with his influence, wealth, and promises. On October 31st, the cardinals met and elected him without even closing the conclave session. He took the name Julius II. Part 3. The Warrior Pope. With Alexander dead and Cesare Borgia seriously ill, cities in Romagna and central Italy revolted against Borgia rule. At the same time, Venice wanted to expand its land. It had lost some overseas lands to the Turks, and lost trade revenue as other Europeans found new routes to India. By late August 1503, Venice took control of Faenza, Forli, Cesena, and Rimini. Pope Julius II first tried to solve the problem peacefully. Louis, Ferdinand II, and Maximilian agreed to work together in 1504, but Maximilian had no money to act. Julius II had to move forward on his own to reign in Bologna and Perugia. In 1505, Julius led an army north through Romagna and Emilia. He worked to bring local rulers back under his control, since many had broken away after Caesar lost power. He also aimed to finish taking lands that Caesar had not yet secured. His campaign ended in November 1506, when Julius entered Bologna in victory, before returning to Rome in triumph. Meanwhile, Queen Isabella I of Castile died in November 1504. In her will, she named her husband Ferdinand II as regent for their daughter Joanna. Many people doubted Joanna's ability to rule, as she suffered from mental illness. Her husband, Duke Philip IV of Burgundy, wanted power instead. Joanna and Philip IV arrived in Castile in April 1506 and received a warm welcome. Ferdinand saw he could not stay in power, so he stepped down in June. But in September, Philip died. Ferdinand then renewed his alliance with Louis and married his niece. As part of the deal, Louis gave up claims to Naples, Sicily, and Jerusalem, giving Spain full control of southern Italy. Louis was angry because Venice left the war in Milan too soon. He also wanted to talk to Julius over Venice, and to stop a rebellion in Genoa in 1506. He believes Julius probably supported the rebels, which raised tension. Genoa's revolt began as a fight between the common people and nobles, not against France. French support for the nobility, however, caused anger. The citizenry took over the city, but in April 1507, they were defeated when Louis sent 20,000 troops to crush them. Louis then met Ferdinand in Savona to discuss Venice. as Venice also held ports in Naples. Emperor-elect Maximilian also argued with Venice over border cities like Verona and Vicenza. To kill two birds with one stone, Maximilian had also long planned to travel to Italy for his imperial coronation. In 1508, he declared himself Holy Roman Emperor and declared war. Maximilian's early attacks failed, however. 2,000 Venetians led by Bartolomeo de Alviano defeated his troops in the mountains, killing 2/3 of the enemy force. Maximilian retreated in defeat and humiliation. Louis saw an opening after Julius grew angry when Venice chose its own bishops. France, Spain, the Empire, and Rome secretly met in Cambrai in late 1508 to divide Venice for themselves. Julius would get Romagna and Ravenna. Maximilian would get Padua, Verona, and Friuli. Louis would get Cremona, Brescia, and Bergamo. Ferdinand would recover towns and seaports in Naples. The League of Cambrai was solidified. Venice got ready for war. Niccolo Orsini, the Count of Pitiliano, led the army. He chose a careful, defensive plan, whereas his cousin Bartolomeo de Alviano wanted bold attacks instead. Their disagreement weakened Venice's strategy. They expected a French attack first, so they moved their men near their border with Milan along the Adda River. On April 15, 1509, Charles II d'Amboise prematurely crossed the Adda River and took Treviglio, hoping to win glory. Venice took it back on May 8th, but the soldiers looted the town and hurt civilians. The next day, Louis crossed the Adda with about 30,000 men. The French destroyed bridges behind them, committing themselves to the fight. After the French-French Revolta, the Venetians maneuvered near Bedino. The armies met near Agnadello on May 14th. French cannons fired at the Venetian militia, who fought hard to stop them. De Alviano charged in with cavalry, broke the French front, and captured their cannons. Then, Louis arrived with more troops, causing some Venetian units to panic and flee. Pitiliano stayed back and did not join the battle. De Alviano and the rear guard kept fighting. About 6,000 Venetians were slaughtered, and De Alviano was captured. This defeat hurt Venice badly. It quickly lost most of its mainland territory, as their battered army retreated towards Venice itself, losing more men on the way. Cities like Brescia and Crema surrendered to France. Other states, like Mantua and Ferrara, took territory they claimed. The imperial troops invaded in June, and captured Gorizia and Trieste. French and German soldiers took food, homes, fuel, and money from people in the lands they seized from Venice. Many villagers liked Venetian rule more, so they helped Venice by harassing enemy patrols and sharing info on troop movements. Venice also tried to weaken its enemies by giving land away. It returned some land to Julius and offered ports to Ferdinand. Both men quietly pulled back their armies, but stayed in the League to keep up appearances. Venice also offered land to Maximilian, who refused. Venice gained time to recover. On July 14th, Venetian troops and locals snuck into Padua. In early August, they even captured Francisco Gonzaga. Louis left due to illness, so Maximilian led the attack. He brought 36,000 troops to relieve Padua, but uncooperation among the soldiers forced them to give up by October. After Maximilian left, Venice quickly retook cities like Vicenza, but failed to save Verona. Duke Alfonso of Ferrara then attacked Venice. Venice sent ships up the Po River and burned villages, but Alfonso's guns destroyed much of the fleet at Pozzella. Venice had to make peace with Julius in February 1510. Julius now saw France as the main threat. He attacked Ferrara but only gained Modena in August. In 1511, he shocked many by leading troops himself during a 2-week siege of Mirandola. Later, French forces took Bologna easily, and the Papal army fled in panic. Soon after, Julius's own nephew killed one of his top officials, the Cardinal of Pavia, over blame for the loss. The anti-French alliance between the Pope and Venice grew stronger, forcing Louis to pull his army out of Veneto. Ferdinand joined because he also feared French power in Italy, and because Julius and Venice paid for a large Spanish army to help them. King Henry VIII of England also joined this Holy League too, urged on by Ferdinand, his father-in-law. A young general, Gaston de Foix, led the French army, while Spanish and Papal troops moved slowly toward Bologna. De Foix marched fast, even in winter, to subdue a revolt in Brescia. In February 1512, his army stormed the city and crushed the defenders. Because the city resisted, soldiers looted it for 3 days. Many grew rich and deserted from the army, which weakened the French force. De Foix then faced the main Venetian force near Ravenna. The French needed a clear, decisive victory, as England planned to attack France from the north. On April 11th, 1512, the armies fought. Numerically superior French artillery and cavalry gave them the edge. After heavy fighting, the League's army collapsed. Even with victory, De Foix and many commanders died. Soldiers wanted to go back home, and locals turned hostile. The Swiss joined the League and advanced with Venice, threatening French supply lines in Lombardy. By early July, they had left Italy entirely. Ravenna was to Louis as Fornovo was to Charles VIII. Part 4. Change of the Guard. Much like Fornovo, French power in Italy collapsed quickly after the Battle of Ravenna. This left the Holy League unsure of what to do next. Ferdinand made a secret deal with Maximilian to install a ruler in Milan they both trusted. The Pope and the Swiss hoped to block Spanish and German influence, and wanted a young to rule Milan instead. The people of Milan chose Maximilian Sforza, the son of Ludovico, as their duke. Maximilian Sforza ruled with Swiss support, albeit poorly. He cared more about pleasure than leadership, and his people soon lost trust in him. Florence tried to stay neutral, but this caused trouble. Spanish leaders and Julius demanded that Florence remove its leader, Piero Soderini, and allow the Medici family to return. Spanish troops attacked the town of Prato, killing and scaring many people. This caused panic in Florence. In September, the people removed Soderini, and the Medici returned with armed support. At the same time, the war spread to new areas. Spanish ships carried 6,000 English soldiers to attack Gascony in southern France. Louis focused on Navarre, a small neighboring kingdom. Ferdinand wanted Navarre to stay neutral and let Spanish troops pass through. France did not help Navarre in time, so its king fled when Spain invaded. The English army, meanwhile, grew weak from disease and broke apart by October. Julius tried to take more land in Italy. Piacenza gave in, while Parma resisted. Ferrara, meanwhile, was vulnerable because French forces had already left Italy. Julius could not invade Ferrara because he died at the age of 69 on February 21st, 1513. Parma and Piacenza returned to Milan, and Alfonso got his land back. The Medici rose to new heights after nearly 2 decades of exile when Giovanni de' Medici became Pope Leo X. Leo X acted less aggressively than Julius, but he used smart and flexible diplomacy. Louis felt unsure about Leo X's plans, so he made a short truce with Ferdinand to pause the war in Italy. Before long, Louis teamed up with Venice and attacked Milan again. This time, the famed Swiss soldiers were fighting against him. Still, by June, France controlled much of western Milan, while the Venetians encroached from the east. Milan became unstable, and only a few areas stayed loyal to Maximilian Sforza. When the French attacked Novara, Swiss troops rushed in to defend. On June 6th, they launched a surprise attack and quickly ousted the French from Italy. At the same time, Henry VIII invaded France from Calais with 28,000 troops. The French tried to leave Rouen in August, but were chased away at the Battle of the Spurs. With no hope of help, Rouen surrendered on August 22nd, and Tournai fell afterwards. Louis then turned to France's old alliance with Scotland, the mortal enemy of the English. King James IV agreed to invade England while Henry was away. In the summer of 1513, 40,000 Scots invaded England in August, and took up a strong position at Flodden Edge. The English army, however, flanked around the hill instead. On September 9th, English cannon fire pushed the Scots off their high ground, forcing them to engage in brutal hand-to-hand combat. About 5,000 Scots died, including James IV. France still faced attacks after losing the Battle of the Spurs. In September, Louis paid off Swiss troops who had reached Dijon. In Italy, Bartolomeo di Alviano stopped Ramon di Cardona from taking Padua. On October 7th, they fought at La Motta. The Spanish won, even though they had fewer soldiers. In 1514, Louis made peace with Spain, the Empire, and England, giving up claims to Milan and Naples. These deals could have ended the Italian Wars, but Louis died on January 1st, 1515. He had no children, so his tall, strong cousin, Francis I, became king. One of Francis I's first acts as king was an alliance with Duke Charles of Burgundy, the paternal grandson of Maximilian and maternal grandson of the Catholic monarchs of Spain. Francis also recruited Venice and raised a strong army with German and French soldiers. He improved cavalry and used new guns that fired grape shot. The Swiss moved to block Francis, but Francis navigated through difficult mountain passes to evade them. Milan was taken in August. The opposing armies set up camp southeast of the city at Marignano. On September 13th, the Swiss crossed the French trenches, but fighting grew so messy and intense that no winner was declared. The next day, Venetian troops struck the Swiss from behind, inflicting defeat. The Swiss soon left Italy 6,000 men lighter, and Francis became Duke of Milan. France grew stronger after the Concordat of Bologna was approved in August 1516. In this agreement, Francis and Leo ended the pragmatic sanction of Bourges. This older law had limited the Pope's power in France, as it let the French king choose church bishops and archbishops. In the Concordat, Francis agreed to remove this law to gain papal support in Italy, but he kept the right to pick those leaders. Leo accepted this, just as long as he could veto any of France's nominations if they were unqualified. It seems like a loss for the Pope, but it legitimized a long-standing practice in France. It also tied the French church closer to the monarchy and reduced support for any future reform movements. Francis returned home proud, even though many officials disliked the agreement. After Ferdinand died in January 1516, Francis thought about claiming Naples and Navarre. Instead, he signed the Treaty of Noyon with Duke Charles, who was now King Charles I of Spain. Charles I agreed to marry Francis' daughter, and Naples would be part of her dowry. Until then, Charles would pay money to Francis, showing some respect for his claim. At the same time, Maximilian planned his successor. His advisors wanted one ruler to unite all Habsburg lands and build a strong empire. Maximilian died on January 12, 1519, at age 59, and Francis and Charles competed to become the next Holy Roman Emperor. The Italian Wars should have ended in 1516, but the personal rivalry between Francis and Charles during the imperial election inaugurated a larger dynastic conflict that guaranteed another 40 years of fighting for the war-torn peninsula